Yeah, it's a good. Yeah, it's okay. Good. Great. Okay. All right, everybody. Thank you for coming tonight to a really special edition class. This Shabbos is the Rebbe's Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, the modern day 20th century leader of Chabad. His Yahrzeit, his passing, is the 3rd of Tammuz, which is this Shabbos. So around the world, a lot of Chabads and shows are doing this special edition class from JLI called Sparks of Wisdom, which is more, it's not a class, it's 10 selected teachings from correspondence or lectures of the Rebbe that encapsulate a little bit of some of his big personal ideas that were really useful and life-changing to many, many Jews across the spectrum. And it's the reason we're doing this class is because the Yahrzeit of a great person, of a tzaddik, a righteous person, it says that their real life is not their physical, persona. That's their human life. But like all of us, the real us is the soul. But by them even more so, because they truly live a life congruent with their soul. So by us, of course, our life is our soul, but it gets masked by a layer of a lot of emotional, body stuff. But by a tzaddik, by a righteous person who leads a life very selfless, for higher purpose, for others, day in, day out, that is their real life. So in that sense, they're still with us. The real life, the really who they are, is still with us because it was never limited to the physical, the physical body. And in a way, it's even greater because the soul is now unhindered. It's not limited to the bodily projection. And the soul continues to exist. And on the day of the Yahrzeit, it says the day of the Yahrzeit, everybody observes the Yahrzeit. Even Jews who aren't particularly observant know the Yahrzeit, the day of passing, is a very special day. And they don't know why they go to the cemetery. The reason it's very special is because everything that person lived for, their good deeds, their special, legacy that they lived by and left, that is its shiniest. It's at its zenith on the day of the passing. It's like everything accumulated and finished of that life on the day of the passing. So it's like the day of the passing represents the full completion of that person's life. So it's at its fullest, radiance. And every year when that Yahrzeit by any person comes, it represents their special legacy is like reaching another level of completion. And for all of us that have a connection to the person, be it a parent, a teacher, the Rebbe, or whatever, we get a certain boost as well in our life's mission. And the more we prepare for it, the more we're cognizant of it. The more we're cognizant of it, the more it helps us it will help us either way. I mean, if you were watching, primetime TV tonight, and we're on primetime, but if you were watching, ABC or something tonight, we're all connected to this great Jewish leader. Our lives have all been impacted. But the more you prepare, the more it's like plowing the field. When the rain comes, it has a greater effect and greater growth. So we're going through 10 teachings, and I'm going to give an introduction to each of the teachings, a little bit about it. Special bonus, surprise on the show tonight is I'm going to share with you a personal family letter from the Rebbe that my parents received a letter from the Rebbe, which I think some of you here know my mother and father's story in New Jersey with the Rebbe. So I have the letter here, a copy of it as a special gift. All right, so the first page, and if you're watching with us, we don't have the booklet, but this is the booklet. We're going to read it out loud so you can join along. So I'll start. It's an English letter, a little way of intro. The Rebbe's, Rabbi Schneerson, who lived from 1902 to 1994, and he led the Chabad movement and was a very influential 20th century Jewish leader to Jews from all over, to Israel. Even the Israeli government were big students of his. The way he would teach, we talk about his teachings. There's his mentor, the Rebbe's mentor was his Rebbe. Who was his Rebbe? Happened to be his father-in-law, the sixth Rebbe in the Chabad leader dynasty, whose name was Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson, who was a great man who stood up against the communists and, miraculously didn't get executed. But he said, there's a famous letter of his, and it's well known because someone who I think never really met him, but was very impressed by this previous Rebbe, and said, I don't know you, but I want to be your student. I want to be your chassid. Chassid is like a loose translation for your follower, student. But I never met you, so it's kind of silly. How do you be a student or a follower of someone you don't really know? And there was no email. I mean, there was you had telegrams and letters. There's no Facebook Live or video. So he told him, the way you're my student, you're my chassid, is not by seeing me or hanging out with me. It's primarily through other mediums, which is studying my teachings. His teachings incorporate both his, there's a really short crash course in Chabad Rebbe teaching slang. One is Maimarim, which means a formal Hasidic, Kabbalistic discourse. It's formal, it's deep. That's like the deep teachings. Studying his informal talks, which were transcripted, his sichas. Sichas means he talked about topics, world events, or just, the times of the holidays, or more, very meaningful, but more of an informal talk in a way. Reading his letters. All the Rebbes, and our Rebbe in particular, spent so much time answering correspondence. People, not just great, rabbis or world leaders, simple Jews from all over, had a problem. The Rebbe cared. They wrote him a letter asking for advice. And spending time, he said, another way how you connect to be his follower, to the previous Rebbe, he says, by spending time with my followers, meaning spending time by a farbrengen, the informal get-together, which we're doing now at some level, minus the vodka. Not for TV, it'll be after. But, spending time because you mesh with like-minded people who want to live the life of filling the Rebbe's mission, being a good ambassador of higher purpose, teachings, Judaism. And maybe I'm missing one or two things, but it gives us an insight of if we want to connect to this great leader, which again, his soul, his legacy is truly eternal, and it's particularly shining on the Yahrzeit, which is this Shabbos. How do we do it? We have clear directives. Study the Rebbe's teachings. We're going to do that. Read his letters. Spend time with other people, Hasidim, who want to be inspired by this great person's care and wisdom. So one of the ways the Rebbe taught or shared his advice or wisdom was through letters, which I recently am starting to spend more time reading the Rebbe's letters. They're in English or Hebrew, and they're in English, Hebrew, Yiddish. They did translate them. He did correspond in Russian or French, and even Portuguese. The chief Chabad rabbi, where I'm from in New Jersey, was originally from Brazil. So he was 1951, 52. He was a young student. He was 16 years old. He would be utilized, or 18 years old, to translate, read, and write translate the Rebbe's Yiddish, Hebrew, English into Portuguese. So, but generally it's Hebrew, English, or Yiddish, and I'm reading the letters, and what's special about the Rebbe's letters, and these are just, a lot of them are snippets, is that, think about it, the Rebbe's writing to a regular person. It's not like highfalutin, which it never really is, but it's not even like an academic way or in a formal way. It's like, I have I real person, flesh and blood, have real petty or not petty problem. Rebbe, please help me. And the Rebbe would take his incredible wealth of Jewish scholarship, which is crazy. You read some letters, the command of like, on any topic, I read a letter about names, like, bam, all the sources from the Talmud, the Kabbalah, and just answering someone, But taking all his knowledge and sizing up the person asking the question and then saying, okay, here's the answer. But it's based on so much. It could be a simple correspondence. It's based on so much. It's based on his ideas, his scholarship. So, we're going to read one of the letters. It's the first one, English letter, 1975. I'm not sure, a lot of letters we don't know who the Rebbe is talking to. But we can assume it's, you can read the answer, this is the Rebbe's answer, you can assume what the question or one of the person's statements in the letters was. So Rebbe answers, quite incidentally or in the middle of the letter, I must take exception to what you call at the conclusion of your letter, quote unquote, my lost Judaism. Someone turned to the Rebbe and was bemoaning his lost Judaism. The expression lost does not really fit here, for no person can lose something that is his or her true essence and inwardness. What is possible is that this true essence of a person is sometimes in a state of suspended animation or covered with various layers of foreign substances, even such that are at variance with this essence. But this essence can't be, quote unquote, or as you wrote in your letter, lost. It can only be dormant, as it were, instead of being active and on the surface as it should be. English letter of the Rebbe, 1975. So we have here a question here for discussion. And we'll turn it to our live audience. In which way is the thrust of this quote important for the Jewish education continuity? So what the Rebbe say? The person saying, I'm a lost Jew, or I lost my Judaism. I'm a lapsed Jew. I don't know what the right word would be, or in common parlance. The Rebbe was very into words. You'll see throughout a couple of letters, the Rebbe was into words. Saying that words, we say words very flippantly, particularly in English, where you have 10 words for one meaning. But words have particular connotation. And sometimes we don't realize the connotation. And the Rebbe is pointing out, when someone says they lost their Judaism, he says, well, he's not going to be, naive and say, oh, you're just as good as you were when you were active. Or you're just as, into it. You're not. Obviously, the person is expressing a certain lacking, but don't call it lost. Don't call it lost Judaism. You could say I'm not fully activated Jew. How would this be important for the Jewish community today? If they had this mind shift, how would it help?
There wouldn't be a sense of perhaps frustration for those who don't show an interest. It would sort of say that they aren't showing interest because they can't see what they need to see yet. But if you kind of slowly bring them in, give them little ideas, then eventually they could see it when they're ready.
Interesting. In other words, I'm just going to repeat it, is if I understand, I'm adding to it a little bit. A lot of Jews don't affiliate, they don't get into their Judaism. They lose their, whatever they had at, bar and bat mitzvah participation. They lose it in their teens or 20s or 30s, or they get back into it with their kids. Why does it drop out? Why? Not always is it because they had a negative experience. So I'd say a lot of it is they feel a certain insecurity. Like, yeah, I had it, I was into it, I had some good memories, but I lost it. And I feel like at a place, because it's not me anymore. So I had it. I'm not saying I'm not Jewish, but I don't really have it. I had it in the past. I lost it. And therefore that just breeds a vicious cycle of feeling of inferiority in their Jewishness, and it gets worse and worse, and you feel like more out of touch. But comes the Rebbe and says that you never changed. It might be buried. You might have allowed some other priorities to become more manifest to the fore of your day-to-day life. But you're still the same Jewish, because Jewish is a spiritual identity that is not subject to even a physical or conscious lapse. I heard this story recently. Someone from Buffalo, that grew in Buffalo, 60s and 70s. He told me Chabad, that was the first Chabad in Western New York, was Buffalo, Rabbi Garari, that one of the missionary groups, the Jews for J, or something like that, put a big billboard saying, "I found it." There was a billboard throughout the country. I found it, like I found, you know who. So I think it was in Buffalo. That's what I was claimed. They put up another billboard that says, "I never lost it," which fits very well with what we're saying here. So, okay, that's letter number 1. Letter number 2. So if I'm going to have you read, I'm just going to read the little intro in my own words. The next letter was written to one of the first Chabad rabbis, whose name was Rabbi Moshe Hecht. He was one of the first 5 American Chabad rabbis, American-born, surprisingly. In 1940s, he was a rabbi. He started it in New Haven. He opened a school, a day school, which is actually to this day still running. And today, Chabad, we figure out some more stuff, how to keep the building afloat, how to keep the school afloat, different ways of engagement. Then it was kind of hard. Jewish day school education in the 1940s, the height of American, trying to blend in and become American, it wasn't easy. So he had a very hard life in a sense of trying to, hard in the way of organizationally. It was hard for him to raise the money to keep the school going, and it was a constant struggle. And he despaired a lot. So he wrote a letter about, and he doesn't know what to do, and he's asking. They don't say this here, but in the book. But if I'm not mistaken, I know the background of the letter. He says he's giving over this responsibility back to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe should do as he sees fit to save the situation. There's probably a lack of money and other thing. Incidentally, Michael Medved was a teacher at this school. He writes about it as English teacher. It's funny. So, what does the Rebbe respond to him? I'm giving the responsibility, Rebbe, I'm desperate, I can't do it, I'm giving it back to you, I'm waiting further orders from you of how to save the ship. So read the text.
I preempted you and responded.
Read loud so they hear.
I preempted you and responded even before you made your request. I already did precisely as you advised. Rabbi Moshe Yitzchak Hecht was sent to your city. It appears from your letter and from the previous one that you are unfamiliar with Rabbi Hecht or the abilities and powers he has been granted. In any event, endeavor now to acquaint yourself with him, and immediately everything will change. Your disposition, your trust in God, your everyday joy, etc.
1974. So, honey, mommy's in the girls' room. Okay. So, wow. Rebbe, I'm giving it back to you. Tell me, you know all the answers. You're the smart, charismatic, fearless leader. I can't do myself. Send help. She says, I sent help. I sent you. I preempted you. I took care of the problem before you even asked. What, you're saying that guy can't help? You don't know him. Get to know him. This is a classic thing of the Rebbe. Classic. People would say, like, I want to lead me. Just tell me what to do. I'm going to listen. Right? I'll listen. Just tell me. You're the wise. I'm submitting to you, oh great rabbi. Tell me what to do. He says, okay. Here's what I'm telling you to do. Ask this person called yourself and get it, and you can get it done. So 2 amazing stories I'm going to share with you about this. I think one, Lisa, you're really going to like it. You might have heard it from the Telushkin book, but it's on this topic. So many times, this is to a rabbi. Okay, a rabbi that had a tough job and despair. But you might say, well, that applies to someone who was born and bred student of the Rebbe. This guy went to Chabad Yeshiva, was one of the first 10 students in Chabad Yeshiva in America. So, okay, he gets cold feet. The Rebbe says, come on, take one for the team, remember our team cheer, fine, whatever. What about someone who didn't grow up Chabad, or someone who's not a rabbi, or someone who's... So I'll share with you 2 stories. One is a famous story that only became famous, it was a story known for a long time, but it was the person the story happened to admitted to it and promoted it, and it says it happened with me. It was a very personal story about 10 years ago. So one of the great rabbis today in the OU, the Orthodox Union, like a national Orthodox organization, known for the OU kosher thing. His name is Rabbi Dr. Tzvi Hirsch Weinreb. I believe he's a psychologist as well. And in the 60s, he was a young rabbi in his 30s in Baltimore. He had late 30s, he had an early midlife crisis. He was about a question, and he's admitting this is why it wasn't known it was him. He even started questioning his faith. This is a rabbi, and he didn't know what to turn to. He can't ask to tell his congregants, So what's he going to do? So he's from New York, from Brooklyn, I think, and he had been in one of the Rebbe's public gatherings. He knew the Rebbe was a person you go to for advice. So he puts a phone call into 770 Eastern Parkway to the Rebbe's office, gets the chief secretary on the phone. The chief secretary of the Rebbe was a guy called Rabbi Chadakov. And he calls, he says, hello, who is this? It's a Jew from Brooklyn, a Jew from Baltimore. Okay, anonymous phone call. Says, I have all these doubts and problems, and I need the Rebbe's advice. So the chief secretary says, okay. He sees it sounds urgent. He goes to the Rebbe had access to that line. So either the Rebbe was in the room or the Rebbe got on the other line, and he tells it over. The chief secretary tells the Rebbe. So the Rebbe and the guy, Rebbe Tzvi Hirsch Weinreb, hears the Rebbe says in the back, he says, tell him he doesn't have to come here to see me, make an appointment, which takes a long time. There's a person in Baltimore who he can turn to, who's very well versed in therapy and rabbinics, and his name is Weinreb. It's crazy. The guy's so Chadakov repeats it to the Rebbe. Chadakov tells the Rebbe's words to Weinreb, and Weinreb's like, there's got to be a mistake here. He says, I'm Weinreb. So Chadakov, he even hears Chadakov's dumbfounded, whoa, and Chadakov tells the Rebbe that he can't ask Weinreb for advice because Weinreb's the guy with the problem. And the Rebbe says, if that's the case, Amol darf men reden mit sich. Tell him sometimes you have to talk to yourself. That was it. And Chadakov said, did you hear what the Rebbe said? That sometimes you have to talk to yourself. He said, okay. And he talked to himself, and he tells the story. You can Google it, Rebbe story. You'll see the video. He gives an interview, and the Rebbe was telling us sometimes you can't expect the answers even from the Rebbe. Sometimes you could, but even better, you can give the answer yourself. You just have to. What's my experience been? What's my and you have the answers more than you think. That's one story. So don't that's an interesting Rebbe-esque way of saying oh, you need advice from your rabbi. You want to be led by the hand by your rabbi. Okay, that has its time and place. Doesn't mean you shouldn't ask questions to a teacher. But sometimes it's sort of I need answers I can only manage if someone tells you to do. You have a lot more in you to advise yourself, and you should, because then you can give yourself advice and you can give others advice. Now for a personal anecdote. You might say, well, Rebbe was a rabbi. He wasn't a Chabad rabbi. He was more Orthodox, non-Orthodox, But he's a pretty learned guy. What about us, or some of us that didn't go to yeshiva, or didn't, or discovered Judaism later in life? What would the Rebbe tell us? Maybe he'd say, look, okay, go to your rabbi at least to get advice. So I'm going to share with you a personal letter my mother received from the Rebbe in 1980. And she's published the letter, so it's not private. And, okay. By the grace of God, second day of Shvat, 1980, Brooklyn, New York, or 5740 in the Hebrew year, to Mrs. Sarah Hein, 33 Oak Lane, Mountain Lakes, New Jersey, 07046. Blessing and greeting. Calmly the Rebbe would respond and start the letter. Your letter of January 3rd reached me with considerable delay. Many thanks for the good news it contained. I was gratified to note that you are conducting your home in the true Torah way and bringing up your children in this way. There's no need to emphasize to you at length how important this is, and may God grant that you should continue to advance in all matters of goodness and holiness, Torah and mitzvahs. I'll tell you what the letter was about. My mother asked, they became Baal Teshuvah, more religious, through Chabad in Morristown, but they actually lived 10 miles away in a town called Mountain Lakes. And they had lived there, they had moved there 3-4 years earlier for the great public schools, and they became, observant. They sent their kid to day school. And it's hard. There's no shul, nothing there. No one's religious there. So they were asking, where shall we move? I believe, as I understand it, the letter they gave in was 3 options of where they should move to. Now we're Shomer Shabbat. Shall we move to West Orange, New Jersey, a Jewish Orthodox place? Should we move to Morristown, which is a small Chabad community? Or should we move to, I think, maybe Teaneck? Maybe another option. Jewish infrastructure, Orthodox infrastructure towns. And the Rebbe answers the following. As for the question of moving to a more strongly Orthodox Jewish community, inasmuch as in your present place not enough had been done to attract more Orthodox Jewish families, etc., which is an understatement. It's like no one was religious at all. I have often pointed out that one has to think not only of oneself, but also of one's obligation to the community in which one lives. Therefore, it would not be right to abandon the quote-unquote battlefront. Instead, a more determined effort should be made to strengthen and spread Yiddishkeit in the community, all the more so since there are not many who are willing or able to do this. It is also well to bear in mind that moving to a new place entails a great deal of expense, energy, and time. And if this were invested locally, much could be accomplished to upgrade the level of Yiddishkeit in your community, both for your benefit as well as for the benefit of the many. And the Zechus Harabim helps. It's a quote from Pirkei Avot, Ethics of the Fathers, that the merit of communal work stands you in great stead and gives you a lot of blessing to help you, have blessing and success. Since by Hashgacha Pratis, divine providence, this letter is being written at the beginning of the month of Shvat, in proximity to the Yahrzeit Hilula of my father-in-law of saint in memory, we mentioned him before, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson, it is surely necessary to emphasize to you at length the total dedication of the Baal HaHilula, the one who passed away of that day, to the spreading and strengthening of Yiddishkeit, and how much he urged everyone to be involved in this vital activity, assuring us of his personal intercession and blessing for Hatzlacha, success. If you let me know the Hebrew names of all the members of your family, together with the mother's Hebrew name in each case, as is customary, I will remember you all in prayer. May God grant that you should have good news to report in all above, thus also widening the channels to receive God's blessings in all needs materially and spiritually, with blessing the Rebbe's signature. It's a pretty amazing letter, big family heirloom there. But my point is, you might say, the Rebbe would say, Rabbi Hecht, Chabad Rabbi, struggles. You're made for this. You're built for this. Okay. Rabbi Hein, not a Chabad Rabbi, but a scholar, a religious Jew, grew up, from... Okay. But what about if you are learning, or you didn't grow up with it? You don't have the, maybe what you would think, the intuition, which we don't have the intuition all the time. But maybe we can make that excuse. I don't know. How much do I know already? I came so late at life in this. I didn't go to a day school or yeshiva. Here you go. Real life. Example. The Rebbe told my mother, my father, that the normal answer would be move to a normal Jewish community. This community, just in comparison, to explain, is like the equivalent of like Mendon. There's Jews there, but it's not exactly, people aren't frolicking of their Jewish observance there. It's not why you move to Mendon, or a place that's not as Jewish as Brighton. So, and the Rebbe said, what a risk the Rebbe took. People just like figured this out. Like, says, no, stay isolated. I mean, in the weekdays we actually went to school in Morristown. We traveled there, but no, stay. Stay there to be an influence. Like, what do you mean? I need help. No, you have to already be an influencer. You have to be a good example.
How far was Morristown?
10 miles, approximately. Maybe 7 miles. I don't know. It was like a 15-minute car ride. So that is that. Today there's a Chabad house in Mountain Lakes, many years later. But we lived there, my parents lived there until 1992. I'm going to show you one more thing. They lived there from 1978. The Rebbe said to stay there in 1979. They stayed there for many years. And, finally there was a Chabad rabbi nearby, and they really wanted to move to, for us, I was like 92, I was 9 years old. They wanted to move to Morristown so that we could be, have more. And they asked the Rebbe by the dollars. By 1986, till the Rebbe wasn't well, he every Sunday would give dollars to people to give a chance to ask him a blessing or advice, and to give him $1 for charity to go do a mitzvah together. So here is the dollar, or a copy of the dollar in 92 that the Rebbe gave as, now it's a blessing to move. And sure enough, someone knocked on the door and bought the house a few months later. And they couldn't sell it, before that. All right. So that's letter number 2. So lesson number 1 of the Rebbe's teaching, the letters is, no one is a lost Jew. You might be a, cover dusty Jew, maybe, but not lost. No one lost their Judaism. Number 2 is that not only you lost Jew, you have tremendous leadership, Jewish leadership in you, and you really just got to talk to yourself and not just talk, learn, develop it, but you have it. You don't have to. Don't look at yourself as a follower. Look at yourself as a leader. You might have to take some learning, which we all have to learn to just hone it, but you're already a leader. Okay, number 3. This is from a book, the first book the Rebbe, I think one of the first books the Rebbe made, which is in 1943. The Rebbe, when he came to America, his father-in-law was still alive, so he wasn't the Rebbe. He was the chief of operations man. He founded the idea of the Chabad house. They called it Merkis Lianei Chinuch, the education center for American Jewry, which is the Chabad house became eventually out of that. He founded a publishing house called Kahas, the Chabad Publishing House, and he ran another fund for spreading Judaism, and he single-handedly, he was, you read the letters, I'm reading out the letters from those years, like, he had to fundraise and go over the manuscripts of the publishing house, and then work with setting up, the youth education. He was one of the first Jewish kids magazines. It was from the Rebbe himself. He coordinated it, called Talks and Tales in 1940s. So he made one of the things for people or youth. He made a little pocket calendar with a little Hasidic aphorism and the Torah portion of the day, or the Chayenu, the daily cycle, what you study for that day. Anyways, so in the entry for the 29th of this book called Hayom Yom, Day by Day, Hayom Yom, he says like this: our service must be a product of our own efforts. Although superior heights are attained when we are taken by the hand and led, it is far more precious when we go by our own strength. Meaning, let's say the question they pose. In your experience, is Judaism presented as an experience where we are, quote unquote, taken by the hand and led, or where we go by our own strength? What is Judaism primarily about, or both, or one? What do you think?
I always see it as trust in God, which means if you trust that you do what you need to do, it's going to work out.
Totally. So we always need Hashem's help. The question is, and this sort of is very similar to what you said already, they're both important. There's a time when you are taken by the hand and led. Like when your kids go to yeshiva, you're just being taken and led. I mean, yeah, you have to show up, you have to work, but you're being led. When you give your kids a Jewish education, whatever you give them at home, you're leading them. Or when someone teaches you, you have a friend who inspires you, they're taking your hand and leading you. And many times we fall into the rut of saying, if only I had more teachers, better parents, Jewish role models, I would go so much further. I could see myself getting really into it. But alas, I'm not. So the Rebbe says, you know what? That's great, but that's not the point. That's sort of like training camp. It's important, but it's really a train. The real purpose the raison d'etre of life is to advance with your own efforts. So there's a time and place for both. But you know what? The fact that it's hard is actually the most important thing. That's really what... that's the reason you are you. That's why you're here, to overcome and to find that you're yourself. Ask for help. It's part of finding it, is asking for help. But don't wait to be led by him, because that's not the point. You're so great. It's hard. You have to figure out yourself. You have to seek it out. Great. That's what's precious. Okay, page number 4. Gennad, do you want to read it loud, the English letter on page 4?
There could be no question of hypocrisy when a Jew learns Torah and conducts his life in accordance with the Torah and mitzvot, even if some of the other actions, even feelings, do not always harmonize with the Torah study and observance, because the incongruity lies in the acting according to the Torah and mitzvot. Rather, it lies in acting contrary to the Torah and mitzvot.
So, how do you understand Rebbe's point in this quote? Ziv, how do you understand? Meaning, what would you think is the Rebbe trying to, in this letter, he always had a paradigm shift, flip it around. You think it's like this, look at it from a very, besides being brilliant, he had a very understanding into people. So, what do you think it's talking? In one word, what's the Rebbe trying to dispel? Which feeling that people have?
Feeling that they're not doing enough, or that they're sort of thinking that they're doing enough. That they're at their level of observance where, okay, I'm doing whatever, I'm keeping kosher, and that's it, I don't need any more. But that's not the case. There needs to be more to it. It's a process. You need to keep growing on it. Excellent.
Anybody else want to add to that?
Feeling that you have to do everything, and sometimes you don't do everything, and you feel like, oh, maybe I don't have to do anything. Or
hypocrisy. In other words, it's a very,
how can you do this, but then do something else?
Exactly. People say like, look, I would do a little more, but I'm not doing everything, so I'm a hypocrite if I'm clearly not going to do what I think I should be doing or what you expect me, Rabbi, to be doing, then why should I put tefillin on? And one of the greatest, things Chabad's known for is the idea of offering people to put tefillin on, and women lighting Shabbat candles, and even one time. Not saying like, oh, do this, and you can only do it if you do it the rest of your life. It's like, do it once, And, at the time, one of the big complaints to people, it's fascinating, when the Rebbe, came out with that campaign in 1967 before the Six-Day War, the Tefillin campaign. So a lot of people in the Orthodox community challenged him or criticized him, like, it's not appropriate to use tefillin as like a gimmick. That was a gimmick. It wasn't a gimmick. The Rebbe meant it in a real way, as a real conduit to connect people to Hashem and to protect Israel. But one of the complaints they had was what's the value of having them do it one time? So the Rebbe, who was very witty, says, on the contrary, do it many times. You don't do it one time. Do it with them many times. But even one time, that I pointed out, is a tremendous. It changes the person's sort of like status. If there's someone that puts tefillin on, it's a certain concept.
A step in the right direction.
Beyond the step, even if they won't do it. I mean, obviously, it is a step, and it will be a step. But even want to say, explain from a Torah perspective, the concept of putting it once simply changes the person's spiritual rise. It raises them. And he quoted, there's a certain term in Kabbalah from it. Hypocrisy is not true because it's not just pragmatic. Like, do a little because better than doing nothing. It's beyond that. The Rebbe felt that a Jew's real, and the Rebbe, not his own, he quoted this from a classic source, from Maimonides, who writes that every Jew's inner desire, whether they know it or not, whether they're educated about it, even if they weren't educated to do it or not, their desire is to do Hashem's mitzvahs. Even if they don't know it, even if they became antagonistic to it, that is detail. It's only that, the Yetzer Hara, we have free choice, the evil inclination, the temptations or the emotions of the world is getting in the way. But deep down, every Jew's inner will is to do Torah mitzvah. So it's not hypocrisy. On the contrary, when you put on the tefillin that person once, you're helping them be congruent with themselves. When a person takes one mitzvah, which will have an effect to more mitzvahs, but even if it doesn't, it's like saying, I'm going to eat a total junk food diet. He says, well, could you at least eat, an afternoon snack with celery and almond butter? No, it's hypocritical. I'm a junk. I don't eat that type. I don't like that food. I like high fat. High fat and high cholesterol food. He says, well, he'll eat celery. Maybe he'll eat more celery. He'll eat broccoli and he'll eat. Says no. He's eating good for that moment, for the way his body's made to be. When a Jew does a mitzvah, they're eating spiritual food the way they're meant to be. There's no such thing as a mitzvah hypocrisy. Okay, next. We have 18 minutes to go through the next 6. So, in 1954, I'm just going to read it to go through some more. In 1954, Mr. Zalman Shazar, who later became the 3rd president of Israel, and who came actually in Russia from a Chabad family. His name was really Shneur Zalman Rubasov, I think was the real name. It was an acronym, Shazar. He became the president of Israel. He was part of the Golda Meir gang, whatever you want to call it. Had a long-standing warm relationship with the Rebbe. He sent the Rebbe an old, valuable prayer booklet, printed centuries earlier for converso Jews, also known as the Marranos, who had managed to flee the Iberian Peninsula to countries that allowed them to live openly as Jews. This is pretty precious, So the Rebbe responded in part with the following. He thanked him for this gift. The Rebbe had a huge library, one of the largest, I think, Judaic libraries in the world, academic Judaic libraries in the world. It's right it's on the side of. Did you go when you were in Crown Heights? They take you to the library. When you went to Crown Heights, they took you to the library.
Yes.
So they have their books that are worth hundreds and probably $1 million. One, old Haggadahs, He sent him this important book, an old book from the Marranos, a siddur, meant for them, amazing. So I always like this. There always was a lesson. What's a practical lesson? This prayer booklet that was printed for or by converso Jews who immigrated to countries where they could openly behave in their everyday lives in accordance with their true wishes. This is a siddur for the converso Jews. Okay. I can't help but think that truthfully we are all conversos to a degree. The Marranos, the forced Jews, they weren't allowed to act as Jews openly. They had to hide it. Perhaps even to a greater degree than them, inasmuch as we act in many ways upon direct or indirect societal pressures. At the very least, we are like conversos due to internal coercion. As the great teacher Maimonides wrote, and I mentioned this a second ago, we are sometimes induced to act in manners inconsistent with our true will. For in truth, our evil inclination makes us do things against our true will. For in truth, we want to be part of the Jewish people, fulfill all of God's commandments, and distance ourselves from wrongdoing. That's from Mishnah Torah, Laws of Divorce, chapter 2, Mishnah 20. It's actually better than I said. Of course, the original is better than I said. It says that you can see this. Jews want to feel part of the Jewish people. You might say, Rabbi, the Jews want to do mitzvahs deep down. Come on, I know so many Jews. They don't want to do mitzvahs. You're telling me don't believe them. They really do. Okay, it's your spiritual word versus theirs, but you see it. You think they all, even Jews who are 90% of the time living in a very non-Jewish, milieu, they want to connect. They feel connected to the Jewish people. What do you mean you feel connected? For 40 years, you're living in Mendon or wherever. You're living in a very, your day-to-day friends, are not Jewish. And why do they feel so connected? That's just something. That's an example. You see, this is not like in the books. This is like you see this. You know people. How do you explain how so many Jews feel so Jewish, even if they're ostensibly not living that way or not even involved with other Jews? Forget doing mitzvahs, just even involved. The answer is that's the deep will. That's the true will. And when they do a mitzvah or they connect to another Jew, they're at home. Okay. It asks there, what are some of the societal pressures facing the community today, the Jewish community today? They always say we're like Marranos, we're like the conversos. We're forced. It's not easy. We have psychological force that stops us from being as Jewish, passionately Jewish as we'd like. What would you say is an example of that?
I think the pressure to the pressure from the society around to assimilate, to sort of keep it on the down low.
Right. To basically just conform to everybody else. To the American society of 2018. The default. The herd mentality.
Social justice warrior.
I'm sorry?
Social justice warriors. Trying to be good all, do all for the good of the world without anything specific. Like it's not cool to be Jewish, you just have to save the world.
You're saying one of the pressures is that it's not good enough to be Jewish by doing mitzvahs. It's like you have to we say in Yiddish, farentfer. You have to fumfer to say, well, I'm Jewish, I feel it, but Judaism is valuable because we do social justice. It's like, no, you're Jewish because you don't have to make,
March down.
Not to say that there is some relevance to social justice in Judaism. It is not Judaism. It's maybe a part, an outgrowth, a big part of Judaism. But it is not Judaism. It is not the core of what makes us Jewish. Some might argue. Maybe they're throwing tomatoes on me. All right. Anyway, so number 6. I just want to actually say again that social justice, Tikkun Olam, has its place in Judaism, but it becomes a substitute for the entire Judaism. That's a problem, because then that's just social justice. It's not Judaism. It's something, and we lose our unique identity that has its special way and imprint on everything, including social justice. So I just want to clarify that. It's not a knock on doing good work for the world, humanitarian work. Okay. The Torah tells us that when our ancestors constructed the tabernacle, a group of talented women weaved various materials for its sake. Seeing they were blessed with a specific uncommon talent, they understood that this God-given gift should be dedicated to building a tabernacle that would be graced by God's presence in a special way of weaving goat wool. The same principle applied to all that God gives us. When God gives us a special talent, we need to utilize the talent toward changing our world for the better. That's not from a letter, that's from the Rebbe's, one of the formal teachings of his. Sichot. So can anybody think, locally live or on Facebook, of an example that you have a talent that you realize it's not because you worked that hard at necessarily, or if you did, it's definitely you just sort of have it, or you might have worked at it, I'm not saying, but definitely an aptitude and a passion for it more than someone else. And how you could use that unique talent to leave a positive impact on the surroundings. I think of something, is it?
Yeah. I think I tend to be a very good listener, which is a good thing to go into for social work, which is the profession I'm going into, which would do a lot of good for the surroundings.
Very good, excellent. And that's a gift when you can utilize your talents both to make a living and to do good, and totally excellent.
Yeah.
All I try to do.
Yep. I'll tell you, I had a thought about this idea. Today, and you know me, Lisa, I'm just, an anthropologist of Jews today. That's what I am. A lot of times, when all else fails, by like a Federation dinner, or I'm saying, or they want to bring something that interests people, they bring a Jewish celebrity. It's very common, right? You bring a Jewish actor, a singer, they're not, and I know Rabbi Steinsaltz, who by the way just celebrated his 80th birthday, big celebration. They're going to put all his stuff, I think, online in the library. Incredible. So he should live with many happy long years and continue to translate and teach his incredible stuff. So I am to that. A Jewish celebrity is not, you're not celebrating that they're Jewish. They're famous because of something else. They happen to be Jewish. No, they might have some Jewish menschkeit to them, fine. But it's interesting how talent can become this thing where we worship it, we're all excited about it. And that's what we learn. But really, it's not that it's about it. Talent is a special thing. Very special thing that should be noted and celebrated. But that's not what makes you special. That's not your core mission. The talent is a special gift to do your core mission. So, when, for a dinner, they bring a Jewish celebrity, and they always talk about it a little bit, but I think it's important to highlight it even more, that the fact that they're a talented person is not what should make us gaga. If they're talented and they do incredible stuff with it and they leverage their talent for real, that's impressive. Okay, number 7. We're running out of time, so I'm going to pick... the 7's a good one. Okay, they're all good. Okay. When it appears that natural circumstances make it difficult, or perhaps even impossible to follow the teachings of the Torah, one should recall that, as the Medrash says, quote unquote, God looked into the Torah as a blueprint, and from that Torah, that primordial, esoteric Torah, the divine wisdom of Torah before it was physical directives to us, God looked into the Torah and created the world. This premise that all of existence comes from the Torah leads us to the conclusion that nothing that exists can hamper our performance of the mitzvot that are contained in the very same Torah. Many times like this, and every decade had its challenge. In the turn of the 19th century, before there was the 5-day work week, and to simply get a job, you had to work 6 days a week, which were Monday through Saturday. Sunday was off because of blue laws or whatever. For many Jews that wanted to keep Shabbat, one of the first things to go in their tradition was Shabbat. You had to make a living. That was the big challenge of till the 1930s or something. Was keeping Shabbos, and that's pretty legitimate. Like it's like kids hungry, or get fired week to week, find a job, have no security, or keep the big mitzvah of Shabbat. And the simple way to look at it is the people that kept Shabbat were such heroes. They overcame a tremendous challenge. They had to sacrifice so much, which is true. But that's very much from a surface level. The Rebbe is saying in this teaching that the truth is, if we look at the deeper, and this way we have to look at life in the deeper, of the spiritual, what's really going on. God didn't just create the world and bam, let it go on autonomous auto mode and just sort of doing. God is actively involved in the world. We learn in the second book of Tanya, called Shar Yichud Emunah, how the world is actually constantly being re-energized by God's actively, purposely recreating the world this very second and this very second. So if the conflict exists, right? In that case, keep Shabbos or have a job or something. That's only to your eye. That's a test. The truth is that it's not. If you stand strong, you'll see that the challenge will dissipate. Obviously, sometimes there were big challenges in life, but usually it's for a temporary, it's a temporary test you should overcome. The Rebbe said many times people think before they keep mitzvahs or a certain mitzvah, they think, "Oh man, if I could do that, it would be so hard." And once they keep it, they see it's not nearly as hard as they thought, because the existence comes from the Torah. The world is the set that was created to play out God's purpose for the world, which is living by a moral code in the mitzvahs, in the Torah, the spiritual code. All right, we'll do. Okay, well, I'll read the next one. Very important story. 1976. The World Paralympic Games were held in Toronto, Canada. An Israeli delegation competed in the games, mostly comprised of disabled IDF veterans. On August 19th, which is the 23rd day of Av in 1976, the delegation visited the Rebbe. About 20, 30, 40 disabled Israelis, mainly soldiers, and the Rebbe made a special lecture, address just for that group, and then he gave $1 and a few words of advice to each one, whatever they needed. And he said like this: if a person has been deprived of a limb or a faculty, this itself indicates that God has given this person special powers to overcome the limitations this entails, and this way to surpass the achievements of ordinary people. You are not disabled or handicapped veterans, but special and unique, as quite simply you possess potentials the rest of us do not. Because if God took away, someone couldn't walk, or someone was blind in one eye, or whatever it was, then God gave you a superpower to compensate. So you're truly super. I therefore suggest, the Rebbe smiling added, of course it's not my business, but Jews are famous for giving their advice when it's not their business. It was very funny. They had a tremendous sense of humor. Anyways, that you should no longer be called in Hebrew Nechei Tzahal, which means the disabled of the IDF, which was the official designation of the IDF for these disabled soldiers. But you should be called Mitzuyane Tzahal, the outstanding of the IDF. And that's, I mentioned before, that's classic Rebbe. Names, words have connotation. And the Rebbe used the word special needs for children with, with developmental delays. He used it way before it was popular. Because it's not only like a game, it's not just semantics, God created this person's situation. If God created this person's situation, that means they're not just like, I mean, sometimes it is, some people have a challenge. It's sad. Some needs pity. But they also have a special, unique purpose that's truly super. And sometimes they have abilities that are really super. I think the story goes, one of the people in this, when he heard this, he went back, he built up a real estate empire. Because he was, he realized he has special powers. Okay? Number 9, there's a well-known teaching of Chabad. Just as we need to know our defects, our shortcomings, so too we need to know our strengths, plural. The anomaly in this phrase is that it says the shortcomings, but our strengths, meaning the entire concept of sin is completely alien to our being. Even when we stumble, God forbid, does not undermine who we are. Rather, it is something outside of our nature that has latched onto us. We are citizens of a material and mundane world, and therefore possible of something unholy to attach to us. Although it's a shortcoming or a defect, it's not our defect. Oh, interesting. But one imposed on us by our environment. This is sort of aphorism. We have to know the defects that we have, that we possess, or the shortcomings we possess. But we have to also know our strength. Jonathan, don't be a downer. Don't say, I have all these problems, I'm so honest. Also know your strengths. But he points out, doesn't say that the expression is not know your strengths, know the defects, the shortcomings that you possess. They're not yours. You don't truly own them. They're issues you have to deal with, but it's not really truly germane to who you are. The strengths are germane to who you are. Okay, number 10. Last one. The Rebbe said about himself in the English letter, my guiding principle is the Bon Mot. I heard from my father-in-law of saintly memory, his mentor. And this is that when two Jews meet, they should not be content with the benefit and the meeting brings to each of them, but they should immediately be concerned with the prospect of bringing a benefit to a third Jew, a fourth, and to as many Jews as possible. That is the whole idea of giving the dollars. Remember, could have just made a line to meet him and greet him, but he always connected to a positive outcome for a third person. Here's $1, I give you, you take it, you go give it to charity. Another person, and of course the person got to meet the Rebbe and get advice, but he just wanted to remember, it's not only you getting advice or a bracha, it's about you being empowered to change, help someone else to someone else. So this ends the little booklet, the Sparks of Wisdom. If you're watching this and you want a booklet, you can email me at info@jewishpittsford.com and I will email you the PDF. Or if you want to stop by the Chabad house in Pittsford, we have a bunch of extra copies. Either way, this Shabbos, the Rebbe's Yahrzeit, do extra mitzvah this week. Light candles, give tzedakah before Shabbos, have a Shabbos dinner, invite somebody, put on tefillin, say extra prayer. Whatever it is, if you watch this class, you learn some Torah, that's already a mitzvah, so that's already a good step. But do something to, get into it. You can also send me your Hebrew name and your mother's Hebrew name, if you know it. If not, the English names work as well. To the same email, info@jewishpittsford.com. And I'm going to be in New York this weekend visiting with about 50,000 people at the Rebbe's gravesite to say a quick prayer for my family and my friends, which I include all of you part of that. And I'll send an email out as well so you can write me your name and your family's name, or anybody that needs an extra boost to help like we all do. Have a good one.
Where do I? Oh, I see it.